So, got some good news. This morning I sat on the hill all night like this, fired right up and didn't stall out, so that fresh oil pump fixed that issue. So I'm glad to finally have that behind me and be done with those issues. But yeah, we took it for a rip last night. More than just like a half mile up the street. We did there's a loop here, and it's like a couple miles, and it did awesome. Brakes work way better than they did before. It feels good. There's no weird vibrations. It shifts. So I'm real happy with that. I don't even know what the video looks like from last night, but I'm sure it's just me with a smile ear to ear. These D-rings vibrate like crazy at idle. They just sit there and make all sorts of racket, so I put a chain between them to keep them from vibrating. I gotta cut the chain, it's a little long. But power steering's still leaking. I don't know why. Keep thinking that'll just fix itself. Maybe there's some dirt in the seal and it's just gotta work out. But so I gotta fix that at some point. So today, working on the gauges. Pretty sure I have all the wires that I need ran to here, with the exception of the rear speed sensor. Those wires come into this giant bundle here, so I just got to figure out which two they are and get them run up to here so that we can hook them up to the speedometer. I don't know if it's actually going to even work, but I believe that everything I need is here in this bundle of wires. And then I took the other day and I figured out what wires do what in these two plugs. So you can see I already tied a ground off of there for the oil pressure gauge for last night. So I'll be able to, like the fuel gauge, one of these wires goes to the fuel gauge, so I'll be able to just cut that and tie in here. And water temperature comes into here too, so we'll be able to get everything hooked up. So, and then I got to patch the hole in the floor. Hopefully that makes it quieter. But I do need to work on an exhaust system, which I think is just going to be a straight pipe. But I got to work on that at some point. So, but it was pretty sweet last night. Got wire in my seats too, so we can move them. The front suspension felt good. You know, it's a truck, so I'm pretty used to, you know, bouncing around in it. And really, the little loop that we did last night, it didn't feel any worse than it did before. I added a ton of weight up here, so I don't think that it would have made that much of a difference. But the guy at the spring shop kind of had me questioning myself on the old add leafs. But the back end is way stiffer than the front anyway, so felt good. Now I got a bright yellow oil pan too. This is what we got so far for a gauge cluster. Cut this to fit in where the old gauges go. It's probably not going to look that great because it really doesn't fit that well in there, because there's going to be a gap between the trim and the gauges. So this may just be kind of a temporary thing, but got tach, speedometer, oil pressure, water temp, fuel, and then an air pressure gauge. And then I'm going to put, all I have are blue LEDs, so I'm going to put blue LEDs here, and those are going to be the high temp switch and the low oil pressure switch. So this is all the gauges fit in here now. It's kind of stupid. They make gauges 2 1/16, which is like 52 millimeters, and the closest hole saw I have is 51 millimeter. So every single one of these I had to sit here and like grind them out to get them to fit. So, but whatever, it is what it is. You gotta do what you gotta do. And I did start on the hole in the floor. I was just gonna put this piece back in there, and it had like a giant thing poking up here, and I just thought it kind of looked dumb with that there, and it's gonna take up leg space for the kids someday. So took and cut that out, so now this will be flat, and then I got to kind of fashion some sort of cover here for the hole that I cut in the back in the firewall to cover that up and seal that up a little better, so we're not getting fumes and stuff through that. So I just got to kind of clean up these welds a little bit and then put that on there and bolt it to the floor, call it good. So we're gonna get working on putting the gauges in here and getting things wired. This is the diagram I made. I know there's a few other people, at least one other person that's doing a similar swap, so I don't know if you can even read my handwriting. This might help, but these are looking at the back side of the gauges, so looking at that. So far, the only one I tapped into is the ground, and it was right, so. I like this one. Nothing, question mark. So anyways, we're gonna get working on this. All right, so gauges are wired. I've kind of tested things, make sure they come on and all that. So everything is in. I ran power for my light on my air pressure gauge, but I lost the bulb holder, so that's no good. I have two of them. That one doesn't have a bulb holder either. I don't know what I did with them, but I'm no longer with them. Those are back from the Corolla days. Also, the piece that holds this down, I had it in like a piece of fiberglass. It was like 1/2 inch thick, so I had to trim a ton of plastic off of there. So now it's not quite long enough. So for now, I just got some scrap pieces of steel in there just to make it so it's tight. Obviously, this whole thing's gonna have to come apart again to get painted. So that's about how it turned out. Looks all right. They don't quite match, but most of them are glow shift. I don't see spending money on a glow shift pressure gauge when I got two sitting around the house here. And then the tachometer, like I had such a hard time finding one that, because the engine only revs up to like $3 grand, so you don't need a tach gauge that goes up to 10,000. It seemed excessive, so that's what we ended up with. So hopefully there's enough room to put the gauge cluster in, so we're gonna test fit it, see if it works. The only thing that isn't completely wired up yet is the speed sensor. I still got to work on that. Alright, so gauges are in. I think that air pressure gauge is hitting on this side. Something's hitting, so I can't get it back all the way. So I'm gonna have to work on that. But other than that, this side over here should fit. So I just got to figure out what's hanging us up and get that the rest of the way in. There's a little LED next to the oil pressure and the water temp gauges, and they are hooked to the switches. So if you lose oil pressure or you're overheating, they will light up. I did not have red, I used blue. I was worried that the blue might not be enough to say, hey, stop driving, but holy crap, is that bright. If I was driving down the road and that kicked on, I would probably stop. So gauges are in, they all seem to be working, with the exception of the speedometer. I still have to hook that up, and I'm not sure if it's even going to work. So this air pressure gauge is a dual needle. So right now I got the black hooked to my tank pressure, and I'm planning on hooking the orange needle to my the pressure going to my brake can. That way, that'll kind of indicate whether your parking brake is on or off. And it'll also, if you're going on the road and something happens, you'll be able to see that your pressure's dropping before the tires lock up, hopefully. I had a bunch of screws up here last night when we went for that rip. They're all the screws that hold like this part together, and it's just one of those things I didn't think about. And right when we pulled out of the driveway, pretty much most of them slid off, and so I think I lost a few. I was able to catch a bunch, so I caught a bunch of screws and set them up there. I don't know if you can see it in the video from last night, but yeah, that was kind of a dumb mistake, but it happens. I'm sure that someone picked them up, and I'm sure they won't be happy when they're on the side of the road changing that flat tire.